Right, morning to everyone that's joined. Cheers for jumping on. If you want to just move on for us, Dave. But Dave's going to be my Boris Johnson this morning. He's our slide as long as content as well. So firstly, welcome everyone. We are, for anybody who doesn't know, we are Code Computer Love. We are a digital studio based in the Northern Quarter who basically help businesses get ready for their future by making great digital things together. So one of our big sort of values is all around sort of collaboration, working alongside our sort of client partners to sort of improve their business, coach their business. A little bit about me. Sorry, go on, Dave. I'm Claire Kerley. I'm the delivery director over at Code. Been with the business almost 5 years now. Background up until about sort of 13 years ago was customer experience in the travel industry, and then kind of sort of fell into digital by default, starting at Late Rooms and then more recently at Code. So I'm responsible for the end-to-end experience at Code. So regardless of the sort of the touch point of where our client partners engage with, whether that be product team 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5, I work alongside Dave just to make sure our clients get a seamless experience. Dave, do you want to give us a quick intro, mate?
Yeah, sure. So hi everybody, I'm Dave Heath. I'm technical director at Code. My background is from a developer many years ago. It's where I started, moving into leading teams, growing teams and agile methodologies, but I've come from .com backgrounds before joining Code. I've been at Code for now 6 years. My responsibility is to help businesses set technical direction, technical strategy, but also make sure we create adaptable, sustainable products through modern engineering practices.
Cool.
That's me.
Cool. So welcome to Product Love. For anybody who doesn't know what Product Love is, it's a series of, I suppose, knowledge shares, picking our brains, a series around sort of like giving our peers, our colleagues, a bit of an overview around sort of like what we think are modern principles and practices for the entire sort of product delivery life cycle. So you're going to get our sort of... Go for it, Dave.
Do you want me to take over? Just is the dog barking? Okay, sorry. So it's a series all around product thinking and all the modern problem approaches. But just wanted to remind everybody, today is World Product Day. I don't know if you knew that, but it's something that's celebrated quite often. So yeah, just thought you should know that as product people. It should be something. You don't get a free day off, by the way. It's not a nominated day, but something you should definitely know.
Yeah, sorry about that. That's Marlowe, the product dog. So as Dave said, it's World Product Day. Product Love, we've got sort of six sessions essentially, which you can see on here, and this is the sort of lean delivery or product delivery session. They're all available on YouTube, so if anybody sort of wants to check into any of the sessions that we've done, please feel free. We'll pop the details on at the end. So product fundamentals today, introduction to product delivery. We've probably got about sort of half an hour's worth of content and then sort of 10, 15 minutes of a Q&A at the end. Quick house rules, which is probably dead straightforward now, given everybody's been on sort of Zoom and Teams for the last God knows how long. So open the team chat. If you want to post a question, pop it in there and we'll get through it at the end. As I've already said, we'll get the talk, or Dave said, we'll get the talk on YouTube for any questions post-session. If you're not talking, please just keep your video and your mic obviously off. Yeah, and if you want to use the hand signal to sort of say anything, please let us know. So what we're hoping you're going to learn in this session, Dave's going to take you through the different sort of methodologies around product delivery. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of how you recognise your team maturity and some of the routines that would help within a team product space. Dave's going to then take you through estimation and sizing and a little bit about process control. And then I'm going to try and finish off with a bit around stakeholder management and all things value prioritisation. And then, as I've already said, quick Q&A at the end. Hopefully you can take some stuff away with you. Cool. Dave, over to you, mate.
Fantastic. I should say, who's it aimed at? Well, there's a variety of people probably here today, a mix of probably seasoned product thinkers, product doers, but also a range of people that probably maybe new to it, some stakeholders that want to understand what on earth everyone's going on about when they talk about product team and product culture. So if you're here, welcome. It shouldn't be scary. It's all stuff that's common sense at the end of the day. So fingers crossed, it should all make sense to you. Okay, so we're going to start with product delivery methodology. And I guess let's be honest. There's three kinds. It's stuff that we know: standard waterfall, Scrum or batch, or continuous and Kanban. And that's what we're going to kind of cover off today. But I want to make sure that everyone's really clear. And again, this is a way to explain to people the differences between these kind of models. We tend to kind of use visual cues to make it easier to understand, and it can be cues that you use to help your stakeholders understand as well. So we're going to use, I'm sure people have seen the penny game or played the penny game before. Some people may have done. If you want, shout yes into the comments if you have or not. But ultimately, the penny game is a way that helps us to visualize the differences between potential methodologies of delivery. And when we play this game, there's a few things that we can consider, like organizational structure, about who's involved and when. Does that create silos or departmental barriers or gates? And how long does it take to get things delivered to a customer? When does value get realized, and where are our feedback loops as well? Let's consider those when we play these simple games. But there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that we need to think about, rather than people just throwing pennies around the table and trying to beat the other team. So I'm going to use this as an example from a waterfall perspective. If we play the penny game first time round, the rule is that everyone in effectively have 3 players in a team, or 4 players, one of them being the customer. You can have multiple teams if you want to kind of gamify it a little bit. But each player turns over 1 coin at a time, and when you've completed all your coins, you then move your coins onto the next player. Now you can see why this is waterfall. So if we're going to just play this one through, you can kind of see what's going to happen here. All of a sudden, player 1 is getting on with their work. And if we think about it from a delivery point of view, this could be, I don't know, designers designing loads of things, and then designers, I've finished my design, pass it on to developers, and developers now start deving that code, and then designers going off doing something else. Player 3 might be QA or accept or final testing. Well, actually, they're not involved, but they're getting handed it all at the end, and now they're testing. And all of a sudden now devs aren't involved and designers aren't involved, and really, let's be honest, the customer's probably not really involved either. So all this process is taking a long time. It's what waterfall's all about. And finally, the customer gets a delivery. And the first delivery and the last delivery all happen at the same time. It's around 40 seconds. At least that's what I timed it at myself. So we've got to think about the differences of what that causes, and that's valid for some delivery opportunities, or some things that we deliver might need to be waterfall, but some things might not, especially when we're thinking more product mentality and how we create collaboration in teams. That probably doesn't suit us. So if we go to Scrum and batch, so Scrum and batch effectively means we're going to turn over 3 at a time, a small batch, and then we're going to move those 3 on, and then we're going to continue on with the next 3. So let's play this out and see how it goes. So all of a sudden now we've got the designers have passed on to devs, and we're now starting to create a little bit of a flow where we're utilizing more people more of the time, and we've already got a first deliverable to the customer in 11 seconds. It means the team are optimizing essentially for how we can get product through that team based on its batch. So we're optimizing for batches, and all of a sudden now we're delivering in 25 seconds. So customer got some delivery and some value early. We also finished it a little bit better, but we probably require organizational change and structure change to make that happen, because it can't happen through silos or gated structures or departments. So if we go on to continuous delivery, so this is the nirvana that everyone wants to be in or thinks is right. And again, maybe it isn't right for the product that you're delivering. Scrum or batch might work, but Kanban might work if you've got a really kind of empowered autonomous team who are given the ability to make decision and focus on value, because that's what Kanban's all about, focusing on delivering value. So if we play this one through, we can see now we're moving 1 coin and moving it between everyone. And there's always something going on, and 4 seconds, a customer's got some value that we recognise we could deliver, and we continue to deliver. And I think this is really important, but there's some very key elements to this, to when you're using Kanban, is that if you've got a opinionated stakeholder who kind of isn't involved but wants to define the problem and the solution, then this model won't work, because the team have to have complete autonomy to be able to really deliver ruthlessly on value. So you can see here, roughly delivered the last delivery in the same amount of time, but the first delivery was massively quicker. And by doing that, also it allows feedback loops, so we can change direction whenever we like, and we can just keep the team focused on delivering value. So really important points there. So between these 3 areas, I think it's waterfall has a purpose think about how you apply that to one of your deliverables, but also consider the team structures that you're doing it through, and the empowerment, because you won't have the empowerment through waterfall as much because you can't change direction, you can't pivot as quickly. Scrum and Batch, you can empower the teams, and you want more collaborative structures. Organizational design needs to be in place, but ultimately you might not release it after every batch, and again comes down to how much autonomy and empowerment the team have. Whereas Kanban, continuous delivery, you really need to have a team which is really collaborative, work together, your organizational structure supports it, and ultimately you give them the full empowerment to make decisions, so they're not being kind of top-down managed or driven. So today we're going to focus on these because we believe these are the things that are all around product. This is how you create adaptable product for customers, or this is how you respond to doing that. And ultimately, it's all about a pull system. It's nothing new. It's taken from supermarkets and just-in-time production systems. Toyota. And Kanban is ultimately why we use that process today, because Kanban is a form of that just-in-time. Again, coming back from Toyota, it's nothing new, and I'm sure people have all read the book. If not, remind yourselves about the Toyota way. Ultimately, it's all about how we think about things. Philosophy is important, the process about eliminating waste, and how we respect team and people and partners to make decisions and ultimately solve problems, rather than probably flipping on its head and having top-down hippo-styled product delivery or software delivery, if you want to call it. When I say hippo, I mean highest paid person's opinion. And this kind of Kanban methodology I know they don't look like rock stars, certainly don't look like rock stars in those check shirts, but ultimately the Agile Manifesto was the idea that we came together to create a bunch of principles. None of them are technical, which is how we deliver Agile software, how we can deliver products much better. And there's a bunch of manifestos off the back, from Product Manifesto that's been around now for a good 5, 6, 7 years, to a range of other manifestos that each probably element within the technical industry have started creating manifestos that run off the back of the Agile Manifesto. And ultimately what it's all about is how can we be more effective as organizations, ultimately right shifting, because we want to be more effective. So the idea being that we can create less waste. People on the left of that kind of this, if you can see my mouse, this kind of here, this is probably more old school traditional thinkers, and then obviously when we come down here, it's right shifting, because we want people to be more agile, more lean, more effective. So these are more of your kind of modern product thinking businesses as you come down here. And ultimately the real reason is because we want to create better productivity, better output, better delivery for our customers. And we have to recognize that also there's a diminishing point of return on productivity. You can't just keep improving productivity. There's a point where the team are basically performing a really good way, and you can't optimize them much further. And you have to be careful of optimizing them too much, because then you can break a team by trying to kind of ultimately take away elements of their empowerment or autonomy. So it's a fine balance. Okay.
Cool.
Claire, over to you.
Yeah, cheers, Dave. So you've talked a little bit about sort of like getting teams really sort of productive. I want to talk about sort of recognizing in terms of like how mature a team is and the kind of routines that we need to put in place. Now, I'm not a big theory person. I'm more of a practical sort of application, like give it a go and see what happens. But there's 2 reference points that I want to bring into the session today. The first one is a guy called Bruce Truckman. You all right? Yeah, cool. Bruce Truckman, who developed the team development model way back in 1965. Now, again, I'm not big on theory, but actually, if you look at the sort of practical element of this, it actually just describes really nicely, regardless of what team stage is at, whether it's a new team or a team with like new people joining, that could be new clients, new team members, new stakeholders, they naturally go through a 4-stage sort of process, essentially, which is forming, storming, norming and performing. And they have to move through that constantly to make them really a high performing team. And as Dave already said earlier, you can sort of put too much pressure on teams to make them like really performant. So it's important when you are starting a new team or joining a new product delivery team, you really recognise where that team stage is at. Just move on for me, Dave. So it's dead straightforward, really sort of plain for me to understand. So when a team comes together, and as I've already said, it could just be a new member of the team starting, they will naturally fall back into the first stage of the team maturity process, which is forming. So they're coming together, they need a really sort of high level of guidance, they need lots of direction. People might not actually know what they're meant to be doing in the team, they're not sure what the sort of role is. Over time, they'll move into what we class as storming, and this, you'll see some sort of healthy conflict in this stage where people might be disagreeing, they might not be happy with the way things are going, the processes, the routines just aren't what people are used to, like relationships, sort of like the role they play is still a bit blurry. And it's really, although it can be a bit scary being in the storming stage, it's a really decent process to go through. You've got to go through this stage to get through into the next sort of norming and performing. So don't be afraid of seeing that conflict and dealing with it, and sort of like, you know, I guess dealing with it head on and having those sort of difficult conversations through like your retros, continually improving sort of processes. Once you've gone through that storming stage, you start to sort of see where the teams start to become normal or norming. And I like to describe it as like you're starting to see everybody rowing in the same way. So like somebody's not like going one way, someone's not going the other. The routines are starting to get embedded. The teams are starting to understand the roles in the team. Everyone seems to be starting to sort of understand where they are. You're starting to get commitment for one another. People are accountable. So it feels really nice and normal or norming. And then what you start to see is like our really high performance teams where we class as performing. So they are absolutely, you know, they're not rowing now, they're absolutely at the finish line. They are, you know, they are going at gung ho. All the team are performing well. They're being strategic, they're being really autonomous, you know, and they can make relatively quick decisions really, really quickly. It's important on this one to recognise that you can go back. So you can imagine you've got a really high performance team and straight away a new member of staff joins, or a new stakeholder or a new client, and that one person can take the team right back into forming. The more high performance team you are, the quicker they will naturally move around this stage. And it's important to note here, you don't sort of like on day one go, right team, we are forming today, and then tomorrow we're going to be storming, and then on Wednesday we're going to be norming, and on Thursday we're going to be performing. It's not about that. You will just naturally see these kind of behaviours. If you just move on one slide for me, Dave, Susan Whelan is another sort of really decent sort of reference point. And she's took it sort of one step further than sort of Bruce, essentially, in terms of like she details how team members and team leaders and members can recognise the kind of behaviours. So rather than sort of going day one we're forming, day two we're storming, you can recognise the behaviours as product leaders and product delivery managers in terms of what stage your team's naturally at. And she gives some really, really nice sort of practical suggestions and ideas and like activities that you can do to recognise one, where you are, and how to help the team move naturally to the next stage. Fourth stage on Susan, you can see at the bottom here, it's all about sort of the goal is reducing the leadership. So at stage one, you've got people being really dependent on the leadership, really dependent on the direction of the team. But as time goes on, and you can sort of overlay these with Bruce's methods in terms of like reducing that leadership to increasing the autonomy of the team. So the more trusting, the more comfortable, the more skilled the team become, the more natural the routines become, the more people feel more comfortable with the routines and the relationship and the role they play, that team will become more and more autonomous over time. Once you've got a really sort of high performance team, it's really important to sort of like implement the routines that are right for your team. So there's sort of 4 elements of team routines that I think, regardless of what stage your team are at, for me, these are the absolute must-have team routines that you should implement. So the first thing, dead basic, stand-ups, they happen daily. It's the entire product team. And it's that quick check into your work in progress. It's around progress towards completion of a task. It's about raising and removing any blockers, and that needs to happen every day. It's a quick 10-15 minute thing. If you're starting to get into like 20-30 minute stand-ups, they're not being productive for you. Planning. This is what we do at the beginning of a work iteration. And I say work iteration depending on what methodology you're using in terms of what Dave described earlier. So it could be a weekly iteration, it could be a fortnightly iteration, but it's the start of planning of what we're going to take into that iteration. Full product team, same again, and it's about agreeing the scope of the work to be taken and what we're going to agree to commit to do by the end of that iteration. Retros, absolutely invaluable in the product delivery space and to make the team continually improve. You would do them naturally at the end of that work iteration, so the end of the week, the end of a fortnight, depending on what you choose to do as a team. Again, it's your full product team. And for me, it's a chance to reflect on the work and continually improve. It's an open and honest space. So it's a chance for the team to, have direct and open conversations with each of the team members to work out like what they want to do, what went well, what would we do differently to move into the next iteration and continually improve. And then something we're really proud of at Code is our 3 amigos. So this is what we class as a mid-iteration activity, dependent on what's needed, essentially. And I would say it's your team lead. So it'd be your lead engineer, your design lead, and your delivery lead alongside your QA. And it's the refinement of stories before you come into that iteration planning. Those are non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. But then there's a whole host of other things that you could do as your team mature and how they want to evolve. Things like a weekly checkout, or a morale score checker. End of the week, how are people feeling? Quick checkout. You could use a scale of 1 to 5, happy, glad, sad. People talk about how they're feeling. They close the week off, they go into the weekend, and we start again on the Monday. Things like pairing will be familiar to a lot of people on the call. Nothing life-changing here. It's about sharing that knowledge. It's about working with your peers and, developing products together, upskilling each other. These are all great opportunities to evolve your team. Skill shares. Someone might have a particular skill that they want to share with the rest of the team. Put the time in the diary for that to happen. It's about, obviously upskilling and engaging with your peers. But that list isn't exhaustive. But for me, if you want to get a decent product delivery team off the ground, you go with those 4 basics: stand up, planning, retros, and 3 amigos.
Thanks,
Dave?
Claire.
Cool.
Awesome. And like we say, this is kind of intro, really, to intro basics. We'll go into a lot more detail. If you want us to, we can go into a lot more detail through talk to us after this, and we can arrange out any support you might need. Okay, moving on to estimation and sizing. I'm going to rip through this because this is where you might need to wake up, make sure you're not asleep already. I'm going to want you to input a little bit. Okay, so estimating, it's bloody hard, really, but we've got to remember why. It's based on things that we do or don't already know or done before, things we can and can't see, and it's not an exact definitive figure, and yet people still use estimates as a commitment, as a definitive figure, rather than an estimate being a commitment to working within an estimate. And we've got to think about this and why is it so hard to have an estimate? And ultimately, as probably product people, ask your stakeholders. It works both ways. Not only will they say how long will it take, but you can ask them how much is it going to deliver? Because they'll probably go, I don't know. I don't know, £1 million, £500,000, I don't know. But ultimately, if we're all vague, then we should all respect the fact that it's complex and be aware of that complexity. So I'm going to ask you in the comments tab, if you click the comments thing and then enter in very quickly, just some of you, I'm not going to skip in here. How long will it take you to drive from London to Manchester? Don't Google it, please. If you want to just type in an answer. Is anyone there? Hello, shouting into the void. Okay, everyone. Yep, 4 hours. Okay, we've got some answers. Okay, cool. Okay, we've got some variation. We've only got 3 answers so far, but we kind of see minimum three. Yeah. Okay. We all know this. We roughly it's around that time, isn't it? Somewhere, but still there's an error margin of probably close to 40% in that range. Very precise, 4.33 recurring. And the reason why do we have that variance? It's because of a bunch of variance factors, driver speed, road conditions, all those kind of things. But we've done it before. Most of us have done that. We kind of understand that it can take between 3.5 hours, and if we're going a bit quicker or we get a good run, it can be great, or it can be a lot slower depending if we're caught in traffic or caught in the Friday rush or whichever. So we're pulling from personal experience, and that's really important when we're thinking about estimation. So I'm going to ask you the same question again. How long did it take to walk from London to Manchester? Throw me some ideas in. What do you think? Everyone's quickly on Google all of a sudden changing the car to the person. Any ideas? 12 hours. Okay, 42. So we've already got an order of difference between individuals of about 4.
27 hours.
That's impressive.
9 days.
9, yeah. Okay, so instantly you can see a huge variation here. And why is that? Well, yeah, variance factors of speed, routes, fatigue, weather, but it's too big. There's too many variables, and we've got no actual experience to draw upon, which is really important when we're thinking about estimation. If we're not worked in that domain before, if we don't know that thing that we need to do, and we've never done that kind of activity before, estimations can be really, really hard. But as a team, you've showed, because you are a team here today, you've showed that you've actually got a difference of opinion, and you probably now have a conversation to talk about it and figure out why you think it's 48 hours or 9 days, and together you'd probably then come to an understanding of, well, we think it's this now, but it's got a pretty big risk factor along with it. Estimation should have risk factors. So the more that the more we kind of like, could we be more accurate to calculate it? Well, yes and no, but it's finding that fine line, because again, there's a diminishing point of return. An estimate is educated guess. A little effort helps a lot, but loads of effort isn't going to make it perfect. You need to be doing waterfall, and you need to be speccing everything out functionally, and you need to spend 3 months writing a document and really kind of like figuring it all out if you want to do it that way. So the whole point here is have a view and move forward, but understand it's an estimate, most importantly, rather than a commitment, because of those variance factors that you've just shown today for things that we take for granted, because we all learned to walk when we were 2 or when we were a baby, and yet we still can't figure out how long it's going to take us to walk to London. So one of the reasons, or one of the ways that we can control this, is complexity points. And it's really important we talk about this. It's not an estimation of time. It's an estimation and comparison of complexity. Now, it's really easy when we're doing this is we always kind of try and refer back to time. So complexity points start becoming time, and that's a really bad practice. We need to move away from that. We can derive time, but we can't make them become time. So we talk about Fibonacci. People have probably heard the Fibonacci sequence, which is obviously how we use that, but ultimately it's a set of points that we use to understand what it is. And the most important thing is that infinity at the end. If you think it's too big, we should say infinity and not be afraid to say it. But ultimately, if we think it's when you get running as a team, you might realize that anything above a 5 is just unreliable in a team. Your error margin or within your delivery is too big. So teams then start becoming used to bringing things down to small sizes. So breaking them down to 1s, 2s, and maybe 3s. If they might try and break your system by trying to put a 5 or an 8 in to see how bad the team respond. But ultimately, these are the tools that we need to use to understand the complexity, not time. And we use planning poker as a way to do it. And the reason we use planning poker is we can gauge that opinion like we've just done now. We've just done a planning poker about how long it took to walk. And you've got a varying difference. So if we think about complexity in the same way, using Fibonacci, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing again, but just post in the window what you think, using Fibonacci, a walk from London to Manchester would be. Okay.
Excel. 13 there, yeah.
Anybody else? Everyone's trying to find the infinity symbol on the character map.
8, 21s, couple more 8s there.
You can just put star if you want to, or type infinity, of course. 21. But yeah, as you can see, we've got a difference of opinion, and that's great. That's what teams need to have to understand the risk profile for a piece of work. So when we have an estimate, if it's an 8 or a 21, our job is to break that down into smaller items of work to lower that risk. But we still might be left with some 5s or an 8 left, and that's understanding us that we don't feel confident it's big, and we probably feel it's risky as well. So always think about risk when we do estimations. And there's some guides, maybe I forgot to add those on, but I think you've kind of got it. So it's really interesting. I think I covered these off a little bit already, that how we use this complexity. A team can share their view of the task, share each other's understanding. I'm not going to read them verbose, you can read these yourself. But ultimately, the idea being that once we've started becoming more, kind of gone through that forming, storming, norming phase, we start to use this data starts to mean something to us, because we can start to use it as velocity, a measure of cadence. So we can ultimately at least track the team performance or health. Now, what we're not doing is using it as a stick to hit people with, because that's bad. We should be using it as a health metric to understand how the team are performing and spot that we might not be improving, or we might be improving. We can use, once we become maybe performant, we might be able to use that to at least create some indicative plans about what we're going to do next, or how much the team could pull into the next sprint or deliver over the next X amount. Or if we've broken a product down into small pieces of work, we at least can potentially forecast when we might be able to deliver some of those things. But again, it's all based on estimates, which is all guesstimates rather than actual real fixed dates. So we've got to use these very carefully. And more importantly, we've got to remember what it's not used at. It's numeric. It's not linear. So 2 1s don't make a 2. That's a common mistake that people will kick a team to say, well, you delivered 7 tickets last week, and the week after you delivered 18. Well, they could have done 18 ones, and the week before they could have done 1 8. Ultimately, that's the difference in how complexity will work. So you can't kick a team based on the amount of tickets they deliver, and also how many points, because the points will change if the complexity mix in that sprint has changed. So there's some dynamics there that we need to consider. Considerations for team complexity, or for estimations. These are some of the things that you should be thinking about, or your teams and yourself should be thinking about when you're running through your teams. I'm hoping you are. I'm not going to read them all out because it's going to take too long, but I'm sure you scan through, they make sense, and you'll be able to catch this up on the online after. I'm going to very quickly go into process control before we jump into the final section with Claire and then questions. Process control is around how we understand how we use flow, velocity, and burn down. I call it delivery mechanics. I'm going to show you something that I'm sure you've never seen before, honest, a Kanban board, and moving stuff, pulling stuff right to left creates metrics. And those metrics create cumulative flow, so we can understand how things are flowing effectively through a board. And ultimately, it allows us to visualize hotspots where things are growing. For example, in this image, in the green, why things are growing, which means more tickets are sticking in that column, in that swim lane, for longer. So we must essentially optimize as a team to figure out why that's happening and then solve the problem. And similarly at the bottom, this shows kind of like a gated release. So this team is probably sprinting rather than doing continuous delivery, because every so often the team release, rather than that blue line following the kind of like the rest of the line. So we would be delivering iteratively. So you can measure how the team performs through cumulative flow. You could be doing burn down if you're doing sprinting, and burn down, burn up, whichever you want, and how you track it. So this kind of shows an understanding of points, how the team are performing, their sprint, completed tasks, remaining effort. And we know, again, it's not linear, because a team should be working to a goal within a sprint, rather than you've only done 1 ticket today, therefore you're now, all of a sudden we sat down having a meeting to say, why have you only done 1? We're now behind. So we have to have faith in the team that they're ultimately working to the goal, not working to a daily count. So just to recap, I'm sure you know these things, but velocity is the amount of work we complete. Ultimately, we measure at the end of the sprint. So example, how many points we've done, based on complexity. Cycle time is the time it's taken to do something to something else, and you can have multiple cycle times depending on what you're measuring between. It could be between test to done, it could be between to do and in progress, or to test, sorry. So you can have a range of different cycle times depending on where you need to optimize and measure between. You can capture waste, which is really important. That's obviously a very important thing, because we've still spent time doing it, but it was wasteful and we didn't see any value, or we stopped it. But that still goes into the team time. An error rate. It's really important that we understand the errors and the issues that we didn't foresee as a team that came out, that stopped us moving forward. And that's the stuff that we obviously take into retro to figure out how we do process improvement. And then from that, you can probably understand your plan to done ratio. So ultimately, how well are you doing as a team? It's again another great health metric. And very quickly onto deviation. So this is how you use some of this information to improve. So this graph shows a range of complexities and the deviation of how those complexities, and our estimations, because that's what they are, turned out in reality. So we can see that ones meanly delivered around just under 1 as a time. Complexity 2 kind of around 2, 2.5, 3s. All of a sudden the spread's getting bigger, and you can see 5 now the spread's pretty big between 5 and 17. So the error rate's quite huge, and this allows us to then figure out how do we probably maybe never ever do 5s again because they're bad. But ultimately, how can we reduce that deviation on our ticket so we can understand we're delivering a little bit more within a minimized error margin. But again, not exact time, it's all about estimation. So again, I kind of covered this off here. It's how we do it, understanding best, medium and worst, but ultimately understanding the improvement process that we need to do. And again, not how to use it. Don't take the best option of every complexity to plan the future work, because the work you could be doing could be the next outlier, the next worst case scenario for that complexity point. So always think about your ranges and plan based on ranges and estimates rather than best data. Okay, Claire, over to you.
Cheers, Dave. So the last thing we wanted to talk about was stakeholder management and value prioritisation. So as we've sort of talked about 5 key elements of product teams. So Dave just talked about flow and estimation and sizing, talked about waste and being able to recognise that, talked about team measurement and how you'll measure what they're doing, whether it be cycle time, blah, 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 and then retros through continual improvement, which I spoke about from a team perspective before. The last sort of, I suppose, success metric in a really decent product delivery team is stakeholder management. So these can be, if you're in a studio world like us, it'd be clients, or if you're in sort of like a .com or a business area, it might be your business department owners, department heads. But they are, I suppose, that critical success factor to a really good project or product delivery. And if you get it wrong, it can go a bit pear-shaped. I've got 5 what I sort of honestly believe are the absolute, holy grail in terms of managing stakeholder expectations. So don't be afraid to be open and honest in your communication. I've seen this done really, really well, and I've seen it done really, really poorly. And I've done it really well, and I've also done it really, really poorly in my time. I suppose it's all about just being really transparent in terms of your communication and the situation with whatever's going on. So don't be afraid of talking to your clients about that. Again, seen it really well, really rubbish as well. Clarity on timelines and deliveries is another one for me as well. That will remove the noise from your stakeholders and your subject matter experts, because if they don't know when something's going to drop and they've got no visibility, that's when they're going to be picking up the phone and mithering the hell out of you guys. So it's really important that you give them that clarity. This one's a bit of a weird one, but I'm a really true believer of it. Is the earlier you can give bad or negative news, the better. And you'll be thinking, what? That just sounds madness. But I honestly cannot say more importantly, this is a big one for me. It gains your trust with your stakeholders. You will know a lot sooner when something's about to go absolutely pear-shaped. You will be planning and you will have that indication of when something's going to go wrong. So as long as you've got a plan to support and you're doing your best to mitigate it, the earlier you can give your client or your stakeholder that news, the better, because it allows you to sort of have that honest and open conversation and tell them you've got a plan to support and you're going to do all you can to mitigate it. And like I've already said, a solid plan to support any conversations. Make sure you're doing your planning with your team. Make sure you're mitigating any sort of like things that could go wrong and you've got a plan to support. Be solution focused as well. Don't go to a client with a problem, give them a solution and tell them what you're going to do about it. And it will honestly, like I say, I can totally speak from experience here. If you've got that plan, it just gains that trust with your stakeholders and will just, really make you have a great relationship with them. And then finally, talking about value. So what do we mean about value? So for me, value is all about, and this is not rocket science, it's about delivering that initial release for your stakeholders so they can start to think about what their return on investment is. Important with value, it's around delivering the value, the items that are most valuable to your stakeholders. I've got a massive watch out here. Remember, value is not all about pounds and pence. We always seem to think we want to go on return on investment for pounds on pence with our stakeholders, but it's not all about that. It could be something as simple as like operational efficiencies internally for them. So don't always go for your pounds and pence when you're talking about value with your client. By having a really trustworthy, open and honest conversation and really understanding your stakeholder needs, you will find out what's their biggest value for them. And if it is about, reducing calls into a contact centre so they can, get some operational efficiencies, those are the valuable items that you deliver through your feature set. So just don't always go for that pounds and pence. Really understand what value means to the for your stakeholders. Just move on for me, Dave. Already said it. Don't think about your pounds and pence all the time. So in summary, in terms of product delivery, the kind of stuff we've talked about, your 6 takeaways from this session as far as Dave and I are concerned, work out what the right delivery method is for you and your team. So, try and avoid the waterfall. It's too old school. Go for your Scrum and Batch or go for your Kanban continuous flow. Identify what stage of your team and maturity model are at. So are they forming, are they norming, are they performing, and think about how you can move them through those stages and get the right routines in the diary for your team. I mentioned, stand-ups, planning, retros, 3 amigos. If you don't go for anything, go for those 4 in your initial team setup. Start to estimate and size your work, as Dave described. Use your team metrics to inform how you evolve as a team. Start with the basics. It doesn't have to be rocket science. You don't have to have dashboard upon dashboard upon dashboard. Just go with your basic metrics. Might be cycle time, might be counting the amount of tickets, might be counting the amount of points, but whatever gives you that clarity to start to evolve you as a team. And then finally, manage those stakeholder expectations. That is it's the key to the success of a decent product delivery team. If you've got happy stakeholders, you've got a happy team and you deliver great products. It's simple. Cool. Any questions? I know we whizzed through it then. I'm just really conscious of time, guys. So I don't know if anyone's posted or if anyone want to post anything, ask us anything at all. As Dave's already said, this session is already recorded for you, so we'll get it uploaded onto our YouTube channels. But does anyone have any questions that are burning right now?
Shout up, turn your mic on if you want to shout it up.
Yeah, if you want to ask, whatever, we are here. So we've got one from Jem. So what do you think the impact of COVID will be to the product teams in terms of way of working? Do you think it means the end of Post-its and real boards? Cheers for that, Jem. So it's interesting, actually. I think like every other business, we have been remote working for the past probably what feels like eternity, but 15 months now. And I can honestly say, as much as I do really, really miss a physical Post-it note and a physical Sharpie pen, I think at Code we've absolutely nailed it. So we've got a really, really decent collaborative tool that we've been using since day one called Miro, which some of you will be familiar with. If you don't know about it, we would highly recommend you use it. But that gives you as much flexibility as you would have like with a physical Kanban board in the office. We've been using it. It's working exceptionally well. In terms of sort of COVID and product teams, just to pick up on that point, some of the kind of things we've implemented at Code. So we do sort of like we've still got our stand-ups. We're doing them really collaborative. We've got visual boards in terms of Lean Kit. So our Lean Kit physical boards are all represented electronically now, and we use those in our stand-up. We do things like fika, coffee, so catching up with our teams just ad hoc to have a coffee, to check in. We've even set up our physical office rooms and our virtual office rooms. So as an example, in the Code office in Manchester, we have an event space, which is what it says on the tin. We've actually even got a virtual event space now. So as an example, me and Dave might just go and hang out and not talk to each other, but we're just chatting and you've got a bit of background noise. So I think if that answers your question, Jem, I personally think we've nailed it.
Okay, Chris, one book to read them all, one ring to rule them all. I wouldn't say there is one. I think you need to have a view, because you could read any of the agile books or lean theory books. I think you need to have a broad spectrum of some of those materials to understand how you're going to apply it for yourselves. Like you say, agile and lean isn't a definitive standard about how you do something. It's a bunch of theory and essentially a personal mantra that you have to drive and hold some of these pillars quite close to your heart. So ultimately, read a selection of books and take from that the implementations you need to do. But there's definitely not one book to rule them all, sadly. Tom's got a question as well.
Yeah, so you guys obviously can explain this well, wondering what strategies for educating clients before a project kickoff so that they're in tune and actually understand our processes and way of working. Does it happen before kickoff or a separate thing you budget for? Do you want me to take that, Dave?
I can start it and then
yeah, go for it.
So when people come to Code, they come in because they want to not only deliver a product, but they also want to create a better internal capability through improving in-house or creating in-house capability. So ultimately, what we do isn't just jumping straight into products. We phase the way that we work into kind of immersion, discovery to understand what we're going to define, but also there's a transformational aspect that we take with it. So understanding what journey do we need to go on. So we do some of this coaching directly with stakeholders or senior leaders, but ultimately our job is to slow them down, to stop just jumping in at the first thing they need to do. So we use the process ultimately to gate how they move forward, and that drives a lot of that improvement. Plus, they're absolutely collaborative. They're not standoff. They're involved in every single activity that we do every day. So by doing, they essentially become that process.
Yeah, and just to add to that, just going back to my sort of routines, what we try to do with clients is bring them on a journey with us, but we recognise that not everybody's in that full sort of agile space when they're on board. So we will work, as Dave said, collaboratively with them, put my teeth in, to work out, what's the right level of engagement with them. Do they want a daily stand-up, or do we do something internal and then do something once a week with a client? So it's very much sort of tailored to what that client wants to ensure that they get the best experience with us.
Simon, I mentioned about should you embark on a formal methodology such as SAFe? Now, you can be in two camps. Agile is great. How you think about it can be very different. As soon as an organization puts out a flow chart about how you become agile and how you are agile, like SAFe probably describes, I think it loses its thing because it's prescriptive rather than, again, it's a mantra. You have to hold it here and here. And ultimately, that's what I strongly believe in. So I personally don't believe in implementing SAFe because you have to back it up with so much more than just putting a process in place. It's more than that. It's nice to have it. It might be a good way to kind of introduce some of it, but certainly don't rely on it. It's not the answer. And you speak to any technical person. I see it on social media and LinkedIn. I'm sure you do, when people post a picture of SAFe saying, well, that's it, we're agile. The amount of people that just go, oh dear, shake head. So be very wary about thinking that you can do it through something like that.
Any more questions from anyone before we wrap the session up?
Yeah, I'm conscious we started about 5 minutes late, so
yeah, I think we're bang on, aren't we? Cool. All right. Just as a reminder for our, just to sort of let everyone know that all our product series loves are all on this codecomputerlove at codecomputerlove.com/events. That's a mouthful. And we've got all our social channels there. So check them out. If you want to sort of replay any of the sessions, more than welcome. Tell your friends, pass on the computer love. And thank you everyone for your time this morning. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
If you've got any questions, then add them into the social channels when you're watching them offline and we can get back to you, or contact us directly and we'll try and help. Thank you very much.
Cheers, guys. Take care. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.